The dog stood soaked to the edge of the porch, trembling, its mouth clenched shut like it was guarding something sacred, when it dropped the rusted locket on the wooden boards. The rancher's knees buckled. His wife had warned that the day she vanished. The dog sat at the edge of the porch, soaked from the rain, its eyes fixed on the river, like it was waiting for something. The rancher didn't look up. He just stared at the empty chair across from him, the one his wife used to sit in every morning. Steam rose from the untouched coffee in his hand. He hadn't changed the way he made it. Still 2 sugars, still served in the chip blue mug she loved. But it didn't matter anymore. She was gone. They said the river took her. Flash floods had swept through the valley 6 months ago, breaking fences and drowning cattle. She was out feeding the chickens when the bank gave way. One moment she was in the yard, the next she was gone. The river had climbed over the pasture like a living thing, fast and angry. They searched for days. No body, no trace. Just her boot found downstream, torn and waterlogged. The preacher said to hold a service. But he couldn't. You don't bury someone if you don't know where they went. The dog, Rook, hadn't barked since. He'd been their dog for 6 years, a wiry thing with a bad ear and loyal eyes. After the flood, he stopped eating for days. When he started again, it was quiet, slow, like he'd lost more than just her. Rook wouldn't sleep inside anymore. He started lying near the fence where the water first rushed in. Every evening, rain or wind, he would sit there, staring out past the trees, his back turned to the house. That morning, the rancher stepped outside with his coat still unbuttoned. The wind tugged at his sleeves. The grass was slick with dew and the sky hung low with gray. He needed to check the south gate before the cows wandered again. He whistled low for Rook, out of habit more than need. The dog rose slowly and followed, tail down. When they reached the old footbridge, Rook stopped, dead still. His paws sank into the muddy path, but he wouldn't move. The rancher stepped ahead, expecting the dog to follow like always. But Rook growled, soft and low, not at him, but at the bridge itself. The rancher frowned. He looked down at the boards. They were damp, cracked, some of the nails rising like loose teeth. Still passable. He nudged Rook with his boot. "Come on," he muttered. But the dog wouldn't go. He sighed, stepped onto the bridge, and crossed alone. Halfway across, he glanced back. Rook stood on the edge, staring at the river below, head tilted, still as stone. That same river had run thick and brown the day it swallowed her. It was quieter now, but still alive, always moving, always hiding things. By the time he returned from the south gate, Rook had circled back to porch. He lay curled in a tight ball, shivering despite the mild air. The rancher brushed past him, boots heavy on the steps, and paused at the door. He looked out toward the trees. No birds, no wind, just the sound of water far off. Inside, the house held its silence like a secret. Her apron still hung by the stove. Dust coated the picture frames. He reached for the top shelf of the cupboard and pulled down a small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in a cloth, was a photograph of her. Her smile was soft, hair pinned back with a silver comb he'd given her one winter. Around her neck, the heart-shaped locket. He hadn't seen that locket since the day she vanished. Some said she drowned. Others whispered darker things. One neighbor, Old Man Deeks, said the river had a mouth that never closed. "It feeds," he muttered once, half drunk, "and sometimes it keeps what it swallows." The rancher never replied to that. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in rain, in bad luck, in fences that break when they shouldn't. But sometimes, when the wind blew just right through the valley, he thought he heard her voice calling from the woods. That night, Rook wouldn't come inside again. The rancher left the door open a while, but the dog just paced near the fence, then lay down, eyes locked on the distant dark. He tried to sleep. The wind knocked the shutter loose. The clock ticked too loud. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her boots floating in the muddy water, saw the locket catch the sunlight just before the flood took her, saw the dog sitting by the river, tail still, like a statue carved from sorrow. In the morning, There were muddy paw prints across the porch, and in the middle of them, a soggy piece of torn cloth. Blue, faded, the same color as the dress she wore that day. Ask ChatGPT. The cloth lay heavy with water, its edges chewed and frayed. He stared at it for a long while before picking it up. It was damp, smelled of soil and river weeds. He didn't say anything, just carried it inside, dropped it near the stove, and stood there with one hand resting on the table like his knees were too tired to hold him. Rook didn't follow. The dog stayed outside, pacing the edge of the porch, whining low in his throat. By noon, the clouds had cleared, but Rook didn't move. He stood at the steps, then trotted down toward the trees that bordered the river. The rancher watched him from the window. Normally, the dog would come scratching to be let in for scraps or rest. But today, Rook circled something under the trees, his nose to the dirt, tail stiff. The rancher stepped outside and called him. Rook didn't look up. He barked, a short, sharp sound that made the rancher freeze. That was the first bark in months. The sound carried through the trees like it didn't belong in this world anymore. Rook barked again, then dug into the ground with frantic paws. The rancher approached slowly. His boots sank into soft earth. "What is it, boy?" he asked more to himself. Rook didn't stop digging. The dirt flew in clumps behind him. The rancher knelt beside him and gently pulled him back. There, half buried in the dark soil, was a small button, smooth, pearl white, just one. He knew it before he even picked it up. It belonged to her dress. He'd helped her sew it on one spring morning. He closed his hand around it, eyes stinging, then rose. "That's enough," he said. "She's gone." Rook didn't follow him back to the house. That night, the wind picked up. The river sounded louder than usual, like it had a voice. The rancher sat by the fire, the button lying on the table beside his cup. He hadn't lit the lamp. Shadows danced along the walls. Rook still hadn't come in. Every hour or so, the rancher stepped to the porch and looked down the path. The dog lay at the river's edge, unmoving. At midnight, he gave up. He opened the door and called out, voice rough, "You want to freeze, fine by me." Then he shut it hard. The wood cracked with the cold. Sometime before dawn, he woke to scratching. Soft, steady, rhythmic. He lit the lamp and listened. It was coming from the floor near the hearth. Rook, scraping at the boards like something was beneath them. He stepped over slowly, heart tight. "Stop that," he whispered. The dog looked up at him with wet eyes, then went still. The scratching stopped, but now there was silence too deep to feel natural. The wind had died. Even the trees outside weren't rustling. He didn't sleep again. By morning, Rook had gone back to the river. This time the rancher followed. He trailed the dog through the trees, across old cattle trails, and past the place where the fencing had washed away months ago. The ground sloped downward into a shallow dip where the river once surged. And there, half covered in leaves and weeds, Rook began to dig again. The rancher crouched beside him. The dirt came up softer than before, loamy and rich. And then he saw it. A corner of fabric, blue, water-stained, wrapped around something solid. He pulled it out slowly. A glove, torn. Inside it, something small. A ring. Hers. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stared at it in his palm. That night, Rook wouldn't leave the river. The rancher left food out. The dog didn't touch it. Instead, he sat by the same spot where the glove was found, nose low, ears pricked toward the water. The next morning, the rancher saddled his horse to ride to town. The local girl who brought eggs was already waiting at the gate. She looked down at the dog and then at the mud on his boots. "You digging too?" she asked. He didn't answer. "They say the river's cursed," she added, like she was talking about the weather. "Mama says no horse will drink from it since the flood, like it remembers." He narrowed his eyes. "Horses don't remember." She shrugged. "Then maybe the river does." He rode on. When he returned in the afternoon, Rook was gone. Not by the porch. Not near the barn. Not by the trees. He searched until dusk. Called the dog's name until his voice cracked. Then he found him. Rook was standing chest-deep in the river, still as a stump, facing downstream. "Get out of there," he snapped. "You'll drown." The dog didn't move. The rancher stood on the bank for a long time, waiting. The sun slipped low. The trees went black against the sky. And still the dog stood in the water, unmoving. Finally, as the last light faded, Rook stepped out of the river. In his mouth was another piece of cloth. Wet, torn, blue. The rancher took it. His hand shook. It was the neckline of her dress, the one she wore that day. The stitch she'd sewn in yellow thread was still holding just barely, and clinging to the fabric, caught in the fold, was a single rusted earring. Hers. The earring lay in his palm like something pulled from a dream. Tarnished silver, shaped like a leaf, with the faintest blue stone in the center. He knew it in the same way you know the feel of someone's hand after years of holding it. She used to wear them when they danced on the porch in spring, when her laughter filled the house, when the world felt still and safe. That night by the fire, he sat hunched forward, the cloth and earring on the table. Rook lay curled beside the door, mud still clinging to his legs, eyes half closed but watching. He didn't sleep again. By morning, a soft fog had rolled through the valley, draping the trees like gauze. The rancher stood on the porch with the earring clenched in his fist. Rook paced the edge of the clearing again, glancing back every few steps like he was waiting for something to happen, or someone to follow. The rancher strapped his boots, took a lantern in his coat, and followed the dog. They passed through the trees behind the pasture. Beyond the hill was a part of the land he rarely walked. Thorny brush tangled between thin oaks, and the air grew colder the deeper they went. The river curved wider here, its edges softened by silt. Rook sniffed the ground, then turned sharply and trotted across the narrow flat. His paws left clear tracks in the mud. Halfway across, the dog stopped and whined, then began to dig. The rancher knelt and helped. The soil came up dark and damp. It smelled like the inside of a well, old, untouched. Beneath a layer of wet leaves, he saw something carved into the earth. Letters, worn and shallow. At first, he couldn't make it out. But then, in the slant of light through the trees, the lines took shape. E+R. He swallowed hard. Years ago, they carved that together, just after they married. She laughed as the knife slipped, and he'd pressed a cloth to her bleeding finger. "Now it's real," she had said. "It cost me skin." He touched the carving now, brushing moss away from the edge. The bark was long gone. The wood beneath was dark, almost black. Beside the initials, a second mark, something newer. A jagged cut, rough and angry, as if something had clawed at it. Rook was still digging, pawing at something stuck in the roots. Then he stopped and backed away. The rancher reached down and pulled it free. A piece of wood, no longer than his forearm, smooth on one side. On it, faint scratches, like someone had tried to write without ink, or had scratched words with their fingernails. He tilted it in the light. There, in desperate, uneven lines, were 3 letters. Yele, her name, Elara. He stumbled back a step, hand gripping the tree. The dog stood silently beside him. Something had been here. She had been here. Or someone had tried to tell him. The wind picked up slightly. Leaves stirred. The river gurgled behind him, low and steady. And in the rust of the trees, he thought he heard again her voice. Not a scream, not a cry, just a wordless hum, like she used to do when she shelled peas by the window. He turned, searching the woods. Nothing. But the dog started walking again, this time not along the riverbank, but toward the old mill road. They crossed a rotted fence, the posts leaning like crooked teeth. At the edge of the field, Rook paused, nose pressed to the dirt. There, half buried in the earth, was a torn strip of flannel, green and brown checkered. It wasn't hers. It belonged to someone else. He knelt down, turned it over. Inside the fold, a splash of blood. Old, dried, but blood. His heart pounded. There had been someone else out here. Maybe more than one. Someone hurt. Or worse. He stood, scanning the tree line. The silence pressing harder now. Even the birds were gone. Back at the house, he washed the wood carving clean and laid it beside the earring. The cloth strip he burned in the stove. Too many questions in it. Too many shadows. That night, Rook didn't come to the porch. He found him near the river again, curled beside a hollow log, muzzle resting on the locket. The rancher blinked. The locket. He stepped closer. It was hers. The chain broken, the metal darkened from water and rust, but unmistakable. That locket hadn't been seen since the flood. It had been around her neck when she vanished. He picked it up gently. The clasp was fused shut, too rusted to pry. But inside might be the truth. He stared at Rook. The dog wagged his tail once softly, then lowered his head again. Back inside, the rancher placed a locket on the table. It sat there between the firelight and the dark, a small thing, but heavy, like it carried more than metal. He didn't open it that night. He just sat, staring, as the wind rattled the shutters and the dog slept with his back to the door. In the morning, he would go back, to the place by the river, to the tree with their names. Something was there, not a body, not a ghost, but something the river didn't take, something it gave back. The sun barely broke through the trees when he set out again, lantern in one hand, the rusted locket in the other. He hadn't touched it since the night before, just stared at it while the fire died down. Rook was already waiting at the edge of the field, tail still, eyes locked on the same path as before. When the rancher passed, the dog fell in behind him without a sound. They took the long way along the river's bend. Fog clung to the brush like spiderwebs, the air heavy with water and old rot. The land was quieter today. No birds, no wind. The only sound was a creek's slow churn and the occasional snap of twigs beneath their boots. The rancher's jaw clenched tighter with every step. They reached the tree with their initials again. The carving looked smaller in the daylight, less like a memory, more like a grave marker. He knelt, running his fingers over the grooves. The newer mark beside it looked deeper now, angry, as if someone had struck it over and over in silence. Rook barked once, sharp. Then he turned and darted into the trees beyond. The rancher followed. They passed through thorns, ducked under low branches, and emerged in a clearing he hadn't seen since the first year they married. It had changed. Overgrown now, weeds waist-high, the grass choked by vines and root. In the center, a fallen willow slumped across the mud. At its base, something white stuck out of the ground. The rancher stepped closer. Bones. He froze. But not human. A deer, long dead. Its ribs picked clean, skull cracked. Scattered prints surrounded it. Raccoons, maybe. Or dogs. But something felt wrong. The air had a weight to it here. Like memory. Rook circled the clearing and stopped near a crooked fence post at the edge. His nose pointed downward. His body stiff. He let out a low, vibrating growl. The rancher stepped to his side and looked down. Another piece of cloth. Faded. Mud-caked. Blue. His throat tightened. He knelt and lifted it. Underneath was a small, crumpled shape. Something soft. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a pair of thin leather shoes. His wife's. Still wet. Still tied. The kind she always wore when working in the garden. He sat back on his heels. The air spun around him. He remembered her kneeling by the beans, humming under her breath. Remember her brushing the dirt off these exact shoes at the end of each day. She was here, not dead, or not buried, at least. Rook stood unmoving, then stepped forward and began to dig. The dirt came up easy, damp and loose, as if it had been turned before. Then he saw it. Another piece of dress fabric, torn, clinging to something pale beneath. A hand. He gasped and fell backward. But the hand moved. Fingers curled. Weak. Twitching. Rook whimpered. The rancher scrambled forward and tore at the dirt with both hands, shouting now. Ilara! Ilara! The mud fell away fast. Her face appeared, streaked with silt and blood and moss. Eyes closed, lips cracked, hair soaked through with leaves. But she breathed. Barely. Shallow. But real. He pulled her free, cradling her against him. Her body was ice. She stirred, lips parting slightly, a soft sound escaping, not a word, just a breath. Her hands clutched at his coat, like a child waking from a nightmare. Rook stood beside them, silent. He lifted her, stumbling to his feet, legs shaking from the weight of her and everything else. He carried her back through the trees, step by step, barely seeing where he walked. Branches cut at his arms. Mud soaked his boots. But he didn't stop. Back at the house, he laid her on their bed, pulled the blankets over her, lit the stove and boiled water, washed her face with trembling hands. She opened her eyes once, just a flicker, no recognition, no words, but she was alive. He called the doctor. The old man came in a buckboard, cursing the road. He examined her slow and quiet. Dehydrated, weak, cold, but no wounds I can see, no sign of infection. It's a miracle she's alive. She was buried, the rancher said, under roots, near the clearing. The doctor stared at him. You sure? I saw her hand move. The doctor looked down at the sleeping woman. Then she must have clawed her way up, or someone pulled her out. He didn't say what he was thinking, that no one could survive buried that long, that maybe she hadn't been dead at all. Maybe she'd been somewhere else. The rancher sat beside her through the night. Rook lay in the bed, tail thumping whenever she stirred. Sometime near dawn, she whispered, one word, water. He gave her a cup. She sipped, slow, blinking up at him like she saw something she didn't understand. Then she fell asleep again. He stepped outside. The wind had picked up. The river sounded louder than before. The locket still sat on the table, unopened. Tomorrow, he'd try to unlock it. Tonight, he would wait. Beside the woman the river tried to keep. He stayed beside her through the morning. The sun crept slow across the floorboards, spilling light on her face in thin stripes through the shutters. She didn't speak, just breathed steady, fingers twitching now and then under the blanket. Her skin was warmer. Her lips held a little color again, but her eyes stayed shut, like she wasn't all the way back yet. The rancher hadn't moved much. He watched her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he blinked. Rook didn't leave the room either. He lay near her feet, one eye open, chest rising and falling with soft, measured breaths. The silence between them felt thick, but not empty. Something was mending. The doctor came again around noon. He checked her pulse, lifted her lids, listened to her breathing. Then he packed his bag slow and quiet. She'll live, he said, but she's been through something hard. Real hard. Might not remember much. Or she might remember everything and not want to say. The rancher nodded once. She's not said anything. Just that one word. Water. Sometimes the body remembers before the mind does. The doctor said, laying a hand on his shoulder, be patient and pray. When the doctor left, the rancher sat down again beside her. He placed a locket on the nightstand, still rusted shut. He hadn't tried to force it open. Somehow it felt wrong, too, like it was hers to unlock. Late that afternoon, she stirred. Her hand reached blindly, brushing the blanket aside. He caught it gently. Ilara, he whispered, you're safe. I've got you. Her head turned. Her eyes opened. She blinked at him like she didn't know his face. He felt something tear inside, but he kept still. She began, voice dry as dust. Where? You're home, he said. You're home now. She tried to sit up, but gasped and fell back. Rook rose instantly, tail wagging once before laying his chin on the edge of the bed. She looked at the dog, and something flickered in her eyes. A spark, a memory. She reached out and touched Rook's head. The dog licked her wrist, then lay back down. That evening, she ate half a bowl of soup. Her hands shook holding the spoon. She didn't say another word, but she kept looking around the room. Her gaze lingered on the stove, On the shelf are the old tin cups, on the worn rocking chair in the corner. Recognition passed her eyes like thin clouds across the sun. There, then gone. At dusk, he helped her sit on the porch wrapped in a quilt. The air was cool. The river could be heard beyond the trees. Not rushing now, just steady, soft. She stared out toward it without speaking. Then, almost without sound, she whispered, "It wasn't the water." He turned. "What?" She didn't repeat it. Her lips pressed together, eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind picked up. She shifted suddenly, hand reaching for her neck, feeling for something. "The locket," he said, rising. "I have it." He brought it to her, placed it in her palm. She stared down at it, thumb tracing the edge. The rust had eaten at the corners, but the shape remained. Her breath caught. She turned it over once, then again, then clutched it tight to her chest. She didn't open it. Not yet. That night, she slept on the bed again, this time deeper, her breathing slow and full. The rancher sat by the fire, the dog at his feet, listening to the night sounds. The shutters rattled now and then. An owl called once. But mostly, there was only the low hum of wind in the chimney and the rhythm of her breath down the hall. Around midnight, Rook rose and trotted to the door. He scratched once. The rancher opened it. The moon lit the yard in silver. The trees were black silhouettes, the grass glowing pale. And by the edge of the clearing stood a figure. A woman, wet, hair dripping down her back, dress clinging to her legs. She looked just like Elara, but Elara was sleeping inside. The rancher stepped forward, heart slamming in his chest. The figure didn't move. He blinked. It was gone. Only the wind moved now, and the river, whispering like it always had. He looked down at Rook. The dog didn't bark, just stared at the trees. The rancher closed the door slow. In the morning, Elara was still asleep, but on the windowsill beside her bed sat the locket, clean, polished, and open. Inside were two things: a piece of her hair, and a dried petal from a flower he'd picked the day she first wore the blue dress. She hadn't remembered him yesterday, but someone or something remembered everything, and brought her back. You said. She woke with sunlight on her face, and the smell of bread baking in the oven. Her eyes opened slow, like she wasn't sure the world was real. The locket lay beside her pillow, open. She touched it lightly, then ran her thumb over the dried petal. Her brow furrowed, and she looked toward the window. Outside, wind stirred the cottonwoods. Somewhere nearby, the river whispered. The rancher stood in the doorway, holding 2 tin mugs. He paused when she met his eyes. "You're up?" he said gently. She sat up slowly. Her movements were stronger today, more certain. "What day is it?" He stepped closer. "It's Sunday." She nodded like that meant something, but didn't say what. He handed her the mug. She sipped. "You used the old coffee," she said. He smiled, almost laughed. "I didn't think you'd notice." "I always notice," she whispered. Rook came in and curled up beside the bed without needing to be called. She reached down and stroked his back, her fingers trailing over the soft fur. "I remember him barking," she said quietly. "I was somewhere cold, dark, but I heard him. That sound pulled me back." The rancher sat beside her, not too close. "You don't have to remember everything." "But I do," she said, eyes far away. "I wasn't just gone. I was taken." His jaw tightened. "Taken?" She nodded. "After the flood hit, I crawled out by the mill road. I was alive. Barely. But someone saw me. I thought they would help. I thought—" Her voice broke. He waited. "They kept me," she whispered. "Out in the woods. Someplace old. I couldn't scream. I couldn't leave. I thought I'd die there. I think they thought I already had." The rancher's hands balled into fists on his knees. "I don't know how long it was," she went on. "Days? Weeks?" It blurred. "Then one night, I heard Rook. His bark. Not close, but not far. And I knew if I stayed quiet, stayed alive, he'd find me." She turned to him. He did. The rancher looked at the dog. Rook had lifted his head, ears twitching. Then the dog stood and padded over to the table. sniffing something beneath it. A scrap of blue cloth the rancher hadn't noticed. He picked it up. Same material as her dress. She reached for it. That was from the hem. I tore it to mark the trees when I escaped. I wasn't sure if anyone would follow. They did, he said. We did. They sat in silence for a while. No need to fill it. It wasn't empty. Outside, wind brushed the grass. Chickens clucked in the coop. The world, which had stopped for so long, was moving again. She stood for the first time on her own. Her legs shook, but she held the wall. He stepped forward to help, but she waved him back. "Let me," she said with a weak smile. "I've been still too long." They walked outside together. She moved slowly, like every step was borrowed strength. At the edge of the porch, she looked toward the river. It shimmered in the sun. Gentle, no longer swollen or wild, just water again. "I hated it," she said. "I used to love the sound of it at night. But after everything, I thought I'd never want to hear it again. And now," she tilted her head, "now it sounds like it's letting go." Rook barked once, a soft, single note, the first happy sound the dog had made in months. He trotted down the path toward the old bridge. She watched him go, then took the locket from around her neck. It swung in the air like a slow metronome. She looked at it, then at the river, and then she closed it. With both hands, she pressed the clasp until it clicked, a sound small as a whisper, but final. She turned to the rancher. "Will you bury it?" He took it gently from her. "Where?" "Where he found me, where I came back." He nodded. No need for more words. That afternoon, he rode out alone, past the field, past the initials on the tree, to the clearing where the willow leaned. He knelt beneath the roots, dug a shallow hole, and placed the locket inside. He covered it with care, pressed the dirt smooth. Rook sat beside him the whole time, watching. When they returned, the sun was setting. The house glowed with light from the windows. Smoke rose from the chimney. A quilt hung from the railing, drying in the wind. She was standing in the doorway, waiting. Later that night, they sat on the porch together, just like they used to. She held a cup in both hands. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The silence between them was full now. Behind them, Rook lay asleep, curled beside her boots. And in the soft hush of the wind and the river, the house stood whole again. What had been taken was returned. What had been broken was mending. And what had been lost had found its way home.